Presentation planned?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great.
Good guess.
Do you have a presentation?
I'm just going to speak to it because it's 400 pages, so we don't.
All 400 pages?
No, it's okay. I'll give you the high points.
Okay, great.
We are unmuted and we are recording.
Okay. All right, I'm going to call the meeting of Personnel and Administrative Affairs Committee to order. Today is Monday, October 7th, 2024. It is 7 p.m. and we are in the Aldermanic Chamber. This has been duly noted in 2 places, including the city's website, in accordance with the requirements of RSA 91A 2. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly, Chair.
I am here.
Alderman at Large Ben Clemens, Vice Chair.
Here.
Alderman Ernest Jetty.
Here.
Alderman Thomas Lopez. And Alderman Tim Senate is here. We have 4 in
Alderman Lopez
attendance.
said that he may be able to make it late. Also in attendance is Mayor Donchus and
Emily Maricello.
thank you.
I didn't want to butcher your last name. Thank you.
That's why I did the little link. Okay, we have quorum. I am going to call for public comments. I don't see any members of the public. Communications,
There are none.
we will move right into interviews.
First up, for Business and Industrial Development Authority, we have Richard Kane, new appointment for a term to expire September 11th, 2027, 22 Sandpiper Lane, Merrimack, New Hampshire, 03054.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here with Dick Kane, as we know him. I've known him a long time. He was planning director, community development director for the city for 13 years, which I think is some kind of record. So he's very familiar with community planning. He also has worked in the development field for a number of years since he left the city. I did work with him back in those days, and at least the latter part of his tenure, and you know, he was very community oriented and forward thinking. And he, the other members of the Business and Industrial Development Authority suggested that he would be a good fit, which I agreed with. So I have nominated Dick for the position of BIDA. And of course, their mission, Business and Industrial Development Authority, their mission is to try to bring about positive development for the city. They're currently focused on a couple of parcels that the city owns in the Mill Yard that were left over as a result of the construction of the Broad Street Parkway, but the switch in the route, which means there were some parcels that were acquired that were no longer needed. And those could be housing for the city and could be really positive for that neighborhood and for the city as a whole. So I think Dick would be a great addition to the group on the BIDA. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Kane and ask him to tell you anything further about himself that he would want to, and of his interest in being on BIDA.
All right, Mr. Kane, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's funny being back here because from 1970 to 1983, I spent a lot of my time down here working with the Board of Aldermen, the various aldermanic committees. As Jim indicated, I'm an old fart. I've been around for a few years. I came to Nashua figuring I'd be here for a couple of years. I'm originally from Worcester, Mass, but at that time I was out in Ohio working. And I came here and I figured I'd be here a year or two. I've been here ever since. My family was raised here. I did the 13 years with the city. I had a great time. I loved working with the city. It was, at that time, politics was still fun. Not quite as much fun these days. And then I went to work for John Stabile as head of operations for his company for 17 years. I went to work for the Flatley Company for 15 years. I retired about 10 years ago. After a year, I got bored, and I've been doing real estate development consulting, mostly in the Nashua area. So I'm very familiar with the city. I've really felt that my time with the city really opened up my career in going into private development because the contacts were with John Stabile and Flatley Company and many others. I think the city's a great city. I've always felt that I owed the city a lot for my career and my success. So when the opportunity came up, I was offered the chance to be on the BIDA, I jumped at it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. And it is nice to recognize at least one face here beside the mayor, and Ernie. Ernie and I go back a few years, right, Ernie?
Yes. I was here when you first started.
That was a long time ago, wasn't it?
I will open it up to questions or comments from the board. Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for your willingness to step forward to BIDA. My question is, some folks in the public have questioned whether or not BIDA's direction right now is, if it's doing the right thing. And what I mean by that is focusing on housing as opposed to maybe trying to get, a business or something to locate here. And my question to you is what your thoughts are on that strategic direction and just in general, how you feel about Nashua's future and as far as development.
Okay, well, interesting question because, first of all, I've gone to a couple of BIDA meetings, but I don't claim to be really familiar with all their operations. I assume that they would be involved in both commercial and industrial development, as well as apparently the interest in getting residential in. City of Nashua has become very developed from the time I came here in 1970, and there's not a lot of land left to be developed. A lot of it you're looking at now is redevelopment. Right now, the hot part in the real estate market is residential, and specifically multifamily. It's where all the activity is right now, and it's where the financing is right now. Industrial development is going through some interesting phases. It's actually been fairly strong in the last 5 or 6 years. It's slowing down a little bit, but it's changed. The big HP facilities, the big deck facilities are just not being built anymore because a lot of people are working from home. A lot more is now software rather than hardware oriented, and Nashua was very fortunate to be in kind of the middle of it when the hardware development was a big thing. Retail has slowed down a little bit, but there's still activity there. I think BIDA has a role to serve in all of those areas. I just think it's a question of where the opportunities are. In many cases, even as being in real estate and being a broker, a lot of the activity comes because companies want to come into the area, and then you've got to do what you can to try and make it attractive for them to locate here. But it's very hard to try and get them here unless they want to, and they're looking for a location in this area. I still think there's a space for industrial development and certainly commercial development. It's probably not as big as it used to be. Residential is still strong, but I remember when I worked for John Stabile, there were probably a dozen strong residential developers in the business doing single-family housing and multifamily. Now, at least the local crew is probably just a couple. So people getting out of it is harder to do. It's more expensive to do. And I think developers need all the help they can get to try to either do residential, industrial, or commercial. Hopefully I can add some expertise in that area. I spent mostly my time with Stabile in residential, and with the Flatley Company, it's mostly in commercial and industrial development. So I think I've got some expertise in that area, and hopefully I can lend some help to BIDA in trying to pursue whatever activities they decide they want to pursue.
Alderman Clemmons?
Thank you for that answer. I think that's exactly what I was hoping you would say, to be honest, because I do think that you said it, and I don't think you said it exactly this way, but you strike while the iron's hot and while people, and you try to get, you try to capitalize on the interest that's being expressed.
Correct.
You know, so I think, I agree with that too, and I think with that attitude, I think you'll be successful on that committee, and I look forward to supporting your appointment, so thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. So along those same lines, you know, I do want to, you know, this is probably something you already know, but the whole purpose of the Business and Industrial Development Authority, and this is from the enabling legislation, it recognizes a need for development and preservation of business and industry to alleviate and prevent unemployment, to ensure continued growth and prosperity, foster and encourage the development of business and industrial facilities by acquiring, developing, expanding, leasing, and disposing of such facilities. So I think what you said, you know, is very accurate. You have to deal with the realities as they are, but there have, you know, you know better than I. There has been, you know, development, you know, that's been going on, non-residential development. You know, like the Manchester Mill Yard has, you know, recently, you know, been able to, develop, you know, not just housing, but, you know, business. You know, and, you know, but we need jobs, and, you know, businesses provide those jobs. So I understand your answer about, you know, what you said about, you know, you have to take the opportunities as they come, but if the Business and Industrial Development Authority, you know, doesn't take some active role in trying to attract businesses, you know, make sure that businesses know that we're here and the opportunities that we have, you know, it's not necessarily going to happen. You can't, I'm hoping you just don't sit back and, you know, wait for people to come to us, but, you know, help us attract those businesses if it's possible.
It's a very interesting issue because there's a lot of brokers working in the commercial market, industrial market. And in all honesty, in most cases, the businesses come to them looking for space, and then they go and find the space. It's very hard, particularly in today's environment, to really try and isolate, identify a company and aggressively go after and try and encourage them to come into a market unless they already have some interest in coming into the market. I wish I could tell you differently. It's certainly something that a lot of communities strive very hard to try and attract businesses. I've found, candidly, in most cases, they come because they've already identified this as a potential market, and then the biggest thing that the city can do is to work with them to be attentive to what their interests are and their needs. And those needs are varied. It's trained employees, skilled employees, educated employees, housing availability, social amenities, particularly where so much of the workforce today is more into the software and hardware areas. Those young people coming out of college want an urban environment, and they want, you know, the National Center for the Arts is a great addition. It was talked about when I was here back in the 70s. I think you need those type of things to attract people, but it's a whole synergy of interest to have to come together to try and get a company to locate in this community. So I think we can certainly help. Hopefully it can help with some of those contacts, but the city's done a good job, I think, of becoming an attractive and economically viable area. And you've got to then try and identify those companies that may have an interest in it and work hard to keep their interest.
Thank you.
I would like to note that Alderman Lopez joined us. I don't know
I'm
that-
Alderman Sullivan at the moment.
You are Alderman Sullivan at the moment. I don't have time at the back of the room right now.
I got him down at 7:13.
Okay, great. What happened there?
I turned on the timer.
Oh, that's what happens. Okay. Sorry.
Sorry.
Alderman Lopez, I meant to ask you if you wanted to ask any questions of Mr. Kane. We were just wrapping up.
No, I mean, I missed most of the presentation, so I trust the rest of the committee did what it should.
Okay, great. Any further questions from the committee? Okay, we will take up your nomination in just a couple minutes.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nice to talk to you.
All right, next up for the Conservation Commission, we have William Darby, new appointment with a term to expire September 24, 2027, 13 Jensen Street, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03062.
Mr. Mayor, whenever you're ready to introduce Mr.
All
Darby.
right, Madam Chair, Will Darby is here. I'm nominating him to be on the Conservation Commission. He's a very active community member. There's a whole list of community activities that he's been engaged in, but most recently, he's been elected as a state representative from Ward 8. He works in software, works in Nashua, actually, in Gateway Hills at a company, a software company, a tech company. He has had a long-term interest in the outdoors and in the environment. Most of his hobbies are centered around outdoor activities, hiking and the like. He's been attending Conservation Commission meetings for a number of months, 6 months or more, very familiar with their work. And he has all for that whole time expressed an interest in being on the commission. And so he's a great fit, and I'm very happy to be nominating him for Mr. Darby, for the Conservation Commission. So I will turn to Mr. Darby and ask him to fill in anything about himself that he would like to add, and tell you a little bit about his interest in being on the Conservation Commission.
Thank you. Mr. Darby?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, I got interested in the Conservation Committee initially when Representative Dutsey, who chairs the committee, came before my committee in the State House. I'm on two committees, the Resources, Recreation, and Development Committee and Fish and Game. Resources, Recreation, and Development deals with clean water, lakes, wetlands, forests, and parks. And in particular, she came talking about some concerns they had with some wetlands and problems that some residents were running into with unscrupulous contractors. So I was nominated, or I was selected for the Energy and Environment Committee shortly after I became a state rep back in early 23, I believe. And except when, unfortunately, the State House meetings go long, which is many Thursdays during session, I've been a diligent attendee and worked with that committee, and have brought back some of the concerns of Nashua residents to, for example, the Science, Energy, and Tech Committee and other state reps, and feel that being on a representative on some of these volunteer boards in Nashua is a good conduit to represent Nashua in the State House. So as Representative Dutsey was talking about some of the concerns in Nashua, I thought, what better way than to hear about it firsthand? So I just started attending, and found that I very much appreciate the work that they're doing with maintaining the outdoor spaces, especially the parks, fighting invasive species, and protecting some endangered species as well. And thought, boy, this is as the mayor suggested, right up my alley. So when positions became available, I talked to Representative Dutsey, Commissioner Dutsey, about that, and she thought that, I'm not trying to speak for her, but that might be a good fit. Now that Representative Dutsey has decided not to seek re-election, I am seeking re-election, I think it will be a way to continue the connection between the Conservation Commission and the State House. And so that's that's the primary driving reason. I also, I have, in addition to attending meetings, a couple weeks ago, I guess, I was off of Buck Meadow, and we were whacking away with students from the local college, and yeah, thank you, Riviere, at one of the invasive species there. And so, I very much have grown to appreciate the volunteerism of the state, and the fact that that's what makes New Hampshire special, is people getting involved with their communities. And I'm looking forward to taking this opportunity to do that with the Conservation Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Darby. I'm going to open it up to questions from the committee. Alderman Lopez.
I was curious about your opinion on some of our, one of our more, I think, environmentally ambitious projects is the Mohawk Tannery cleanup. We're generally committed to trying to clean up an existing toxic waste site that has kind of slipped under EPA rules. But there is a component of it which includes potentially linking that community to Mine Falls. Do you have any feelings or opinions on the prospect of putting a footbridge, what kind of effect that might have on the river, the surrounding areas?
Well, thank you, Alderman. I definitely wouldn't say that I'm an expert here. Of course, I am aware of the development going in, plan to go in, into that community, and the cap. I guess they're going to cap some of the, some of the sludge areas. I've heard some concerns about that cap, but I've also heard that it's the most cost-effective way to basically reclaim that land that's been, as I understand it, not, has sat mostly abandoned. And I do hope that, the largest challenge New Hampshire faces as a whole is affordable housing. And I do hope that the area can be cleaned up enough to, so that the housing can be developed, and, Nashua is already doing more than its fair share of promoting housing across the state, and will continue. In particular, with respect to your specific question, I'm not familiar with where that land bridge might be. I think it is in your ward, but and I'm happy to do some more digging there. But in general, I guess I support people's access to green spaces, and Mine Falls is a great green space. My family has many times hiked those paths, brought our dogs. We've even, when my kids were younger, taken the canoe out and fished on the ponds and the Nashua River. So I guess I would say in general, I support access, and if I believe that when there's work around wetlands, like a footbridge, the Department of Environmental Services, I think, responsibly gets involved to make sure that it's going to be done in a way that is, of course, compliant with the law, but also protects does the best possible to protect the environment. I think the Department of Environmental Services is, especially the water division, really does have New Hampshire's wetlands, lakes, and rivers in their best interest, and they do their best with the constraints they have to protect them. So Did that answer your question?
Yeah, if I may.
Alderman Lopez.
So just a nuance, the project directly doesn't have affordable housing in it. The inclusionary zoning allows for there to be a contribution to the housing fund, and that contribution will heavily support another project that we're doing for affordable housing. So while it won't necessarily be located there specifically, it does contribute to the overall city's needs, and probably in a more specific and proficient way, given that the agency that's going to be using that money is much more adept at implementing affordable housing. So just a positive note. But I wasn't necessarily asking the question because I wanted you to have the same answer we would have at the board. It doesn't serve us to have advisory boards if they only do what we say or support the things we want. So I wanted to see how you would approach the issue. And your answer was thorough, it was honest, it was candid, and it was well thought out. I would have no problem listening to recommendations from you, so I appreciate your willingness to serve.
Thank you.
Alderman Senate, I saw you, and then Alderman Clemmons.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Not so much a comment, but or a question, but really just a couple of comments. I believe the first time that you and I, Representative Darby, met was out of our mutual interest in a environmental concern in my own neighborhood, which was the proposed asphalt plant over on Temple Street. So it was a little surprise to me to see your name come across as a recommendation for this committee. I just wanted to remark that I really appreciated what you had to say in regard to serving as a conduit between the city of Nashua and the State House up in Concord. I feel being on the same page as our representatives up in Concord is how we're going to get things done here in the city. And you know, we're finally, after decades, on the cusp of getting something done about the tannery that we mentioned over near the Little Florida neighborhood. And I think that having somebody on like you on this commission in particular may help us with the other opportunities that are out in the community, such as the Coppers property, which is a whole other topic. But if you're not familiar, I certainly encourage you to familiarize yourself with that one as a member of the Conservation Commission, because it's certainly an opportunity, but it shares a lot of the same characteristics that Mohawk Tannery does. So thank you for putting your name forward for this, and I look forward to supporting your nomination.
Thank you.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yeah, just a clarification to something Alderman Lopez said. The Mohawk project is going to have some affordability component to it. It's very small. I think it's like 30 units or so, which when you think about in the context of that entire project, the fact that the building, what they're building there essentially is subsidizing the cost to remediate the environmental concerns. The fact that there is some affordable housing unit component to that project, I think, is a feather in the cap of this administration, you know, because in all reality, had they come back and said no, that's just not possible in order for us to make the financing work on this, I think we all would have said, we understand. So the fact that there is an affordable units, even though they are small, I think is really something to be proud of. But in regards to your appointment to the commission, I think that your record speaks for itself, and I hope that you do continue to bring Nashua's concerns up to the legislature, because I will say, just as an example, you know, Nashua's concerns are the same concerns that other communities have in the state. And, you know, a recent example of that is the cyanobacteria blooms that happen up on Lake Winnipesaukee and other bodies of water, well, they happen here too. And we have neighborhoods that are along the river or that are, there's ponds. And this happens in the city. And my concern about that is that there's been studies that show that that particular algae can cause things like ALS. It can cause other things that are just unstudied and unknown. But regardless, we know that we don't want green scum on the top of our lakes and rivers and ponds. And so, it's that kind of thing that you might think, well, maybe that only affects the lakes region, or maybe it doesn't. All of these things are interconnected. So in that regard, I hope that you bring some of those issues back to Nashua so that we can discuss them here on a local level too. Because if we do have a situation like that where the governor decides he's going to veto, frankly, legislation that is, bipartisan in nature, maybe there's something we could do on a local level. So, I enjoy those conversations, and I think that's what we are here for, and so I hope that communication goes both ways. And I look forward to supporting your nomination.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I feel like I've been able to develop a bit of relationship and rapport with a number of aldermen, and issues like, I think I incorrectly used the term, honestly, affordable housing, but housing in general, because even market rate housing is outrageous right now for many of our young people. But issues like housing, issues like the cleanup, the access to the Nashua River, even the hydropower. Hydropower is another thing that we deal with on the Resources, Recreation, and Development Committee, and dam maintenance. And like you said, cyanobacteria is a scourge right now across New Hampshire. It's devastating lakes, that have been some of the purest lakes ever, and it really requires a lot of education. This is not going to be solved by treatments. It's going to be solved by reducing the influx of pollutions and continued pollutants in order to reduce it over time. But yes, to your point, I very much hope that we can have a bi-directional conversation.
Thank you.
Mayor Donches.
Regarding Mohawk, both aldermen are correct. It is a two-part development. There's the rental part, of which 20% will comply with the city's inclusionary zoning ordinance. 20% will be affordable, and that will be between 40 and 50 units. And then on the second part of the development, which is going to be condos for purchase, on that part, they will make, as Alderman Lopez suggested, will make an affordable housing contribution of, I think, $2.3 million. So both components are there, and as part of the Mohawk redevelopment.
And thank you for your clarification on that. I was also, my ears perked up because I remembered it as that. So, thank you. Unless there's Alderman Jettie.
Thank you. So I want to thank you for being willing to serve, stepping forward. I'm impressed with, I'm familiar somewhat with your committee work in the legislature, and the fact that you're willing to serve as a state representative, and give up the time necessary to do that. I thank you for that, and your willingness to step forward and also become a member of the Conservation Commission. I thought you were a member, because when I was a liaison to the commission, I remember you coming to the meetings there, and I guess you were just interested at that point, and I appreciate you're giving up your time just to come to the meetings, and I'm glad to see that the opportunity has arisen for you to become a full member. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, there's nothing further. We will be taking up your nomination.
Thank
today.
you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay.
Your favorite one?
I guess I was gonna pick up. Application to license hawkers, peddlers, itinerant vendors license.
There are none.
Okay. Oh, there's a line missing, I think. Okay.
It's just, they didn't space it, but there's appointments by.
Oh, there it is. Yep.
Yep.
Appointments by the mayor.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to recommend to the Business and Industrial Development Authority the reappointments of Deborah Novotny and Jason Haviland with terms to expire September 30th, 2027, and the new appointment of Richard Kane with a term to expire September 11th, 2027, and to recommend the reappointment of Elizabeth Betsy Hode to the Citizens Advisory Committee for Community Grants with a term to expire October 1st, 2027, to recommend the new appointment of William Darby to the Conservation Commission with a term to expire September 4th, 2027, 24th, 2027, thank you. To recommend the reappointment of Carol W. Roby to the Arts Commission with a term to expire August 31st, 2027, and to recommend the reappointment of Helen Honoro to the Nashua Housing and Redevelopment Authority with a term to expire October 14th, 2029.
You've heard the motion. Is there discussion on that motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Unfinished business.
There is none.
New business resolutions.
Before us, we have R 24090, relative to the adoption of the City of Nashua Hazard Mitigation Plan 2024 update. I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is final passage. We do have someone to speak to it.
I will speak briefly, since I'm sure you've all read the 300-page report. My name is Emily Marticello. I'm the Director of Emergency Management for the city. And I told the chairwoman that I'm not going to give a presentation on the 300-page report, but I just wanted to highlight just a few points about our hazard mitigation plan. First of all, this is something we do every 5 years. The city does it in-house. A lot of places hire out for it. We do it in-house between emergency management, community development, our sustainability department, and then I make every other department participate as well. So it's a whole team effort. The major change this year with our hazard mitigation plan, which we're really proud of, is it went from a natural hazards only to it includes all man-made and technological hazards. So any hazard we have in our emergency operations plan is now in our hazard mitigation plan. What that means is we did more detailed risk assessments, but we also identified mitigation strategies. So for example, one of them that we're all familiar with, cyber incidents, that's now in our hazard mitigation plan. So that's important. I do want to make a comment on the fiscal note. It was very confusing for myself and the city staff to try to do the fiscal note. I'll say where I stand on it is the hazard mitigation plan commits us to nothing. We're not committing to spending any money because of the plan. Actually, what it does is it allows us to go forward and get the federal grants we need to implement the mitigation actions we want to as a city and prioritize the ones we want to fund. So I think the fiscal note's slightly misleading because yes, it could lead to projects that require funding, but again, those would all have to come before the board anyways. So the plan itself expends no money and doesn't commit us to expending any money. It just simply identifies and prioritizes mitigation actions we would like to take as a city. And for most grants we go after, it's required that those were listed in our hazard mitigation plan in order to pursue those grants. So this is really a mechanism for us to go after the federal funding we need. And the last part of that is we're required to have this plan that is adopted by the board. It's the only way we're able to get money should there be a disaster and there be a disaster declaration. If we don't have an approved and adopted hazard mitigation plan, we cannot receive those disaster dollars that you see everybody in North Carolina and Florida getting right now. We would not be able to do that. Additionally, it's a requirement of our National Flood Insurance Program, of which I wish we had more people in Nashua that had flood insurance. There's only about 200 policyholders right now. But this is a major component of them being able to get that policy. And we have an advanced program, so they actually get a discount because we are advanced in our planning for mitigation specifically to flood hazards. So our residents actually get a discount on their flood insurance because of our participation in the community rating system through the National Flood Insurance Program, which is managed by our sustainability department. So again, I know you guys have thoroughly read the whole thing, but if you have any questions about the hazard mitigation plan, why we do it, and what the point of it is, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Okay, I'll open up to questions from the committee. I have many comments myself. Alderman Clemmons and then Alderman Lopez.
Thank you. So I know that you mentioned that, we had some updates to this to include things like cyber attacks and some other things. My question is, if something like that was to happen again, or if one of these things that you've added was to happen, would that open us up for potentially grants and things to try to help mitigate those costs because now they are incorporated into the plan?
Bingo. Yes, exactly. So the key is to pre-identify through consensus actions we would like to take. That way we're able to identify funding. So cyber, that's a great example. There's a new program out of the federal government, the state and local cybersecurity grant program. We were able to get some of that because of the inclusion of it, not only in this plan, but the after action reporting and other things we did from the cyber incident that the school department had. So incorporating these things to the extent that we can by documenting them ahead of time is really important. So, the government, rightfully so, when we apply for projects, doesn't want us to just, grab the shiny object. They want us to demonstrate that we have an actual need for it. And that's why it's so important that we expanded the scope of what was covered in the hazard mitigation plan to all of the hazards that we plan for in the city, because kind of, again, how the federal government works is there's a specific grant program for every little thing. So it's important that we have those all documented in the plan with what we want to do so that we can prioritize when those programs do come up. Does that kind of answer that question?
It does, thank you.
You've read the report, you see.
Alderman Lopez, I had you next.
With regards to extreme weather conditions, it doesn't explicitly mention more vulnerable populations like unsheltered, elderly. Aren't those areas where we could potentially get funding and do more strategic planning? I know every year we work on where people are going to go when it's freezing temperatures and they don't have anywhere to go to. And likewise, we also do general announcements to make sure that generally the elderly are aware that we have warming stations if heat or air conditioning fails in their areas, but isn't there more we can do, and shouldn't that be something explicitly mentioned in the plan?
I think that's a great question. So a couple of things on that. First of all, you've been very important and instrumental at amplifying our extreme heat response planning. And so I would kind of explain this in a couple ways. One, this hazard mitigation plan is strictly focused on mitigating actions pre-incident. So it has none of our response actions in it. So anything that would happen during or immediately after an emergency would not be in the hazard mitigation plan. Those would be in our emergency operations plan, or specifically to the one you just mentioned, our extreme heat response plan. However, to your point, planning for vulnerable populations is in the hazard mitigation plan. It's one of the required categories that we needed to identify all the different populations within the community. So those include specifically unhoused, people with limited access to transportation, communication barriers, elderly children. So all of those populations are outlined in there. And when we looked at different mitigation strategies, there are a few specifically outlined for extreme heat on programs that we would want to implement to better mitigate. Again, so when we talk about mitigation, it's how do we lessen the impact of the threat or hazard. So when it comes to extreme heat, to your point, Alderman Lopez, the mitigation action is like trying to somehow prevent the heat, which is those are limited. So there's some things in there where we reference the sustainability plan. We talk about promoting cool blocks, so planting trees, creating more green spaces. It's a little confusing because our different actions are in different plans. And so when we talk about warming and cooling centers, those are going to be in our emergency operations plan. just a separate pan. But I 100% agree with everything you just said. And the other thing I'll say is I'm never done planning for that. So when we talk about our vulnerable populations, there's never enough in any plan we have. So what we constantly have to do is after each incident, we update our plans. So we do an exercise at the beginning of the year to exercise our extreme heat plan. Every time we activate it, we do an after-action meeting to say what worked, what didn't work. Like, do we need to start providing transportation? Is the cooling center in an area people can get to? Those things are all considered response actions and not preventative mitigation actions. So they're not detailed at all in the hazard mitigation plan. Does that kind of make sense?
I guess the way you're explaining it, but I would have thought mitigating would have been planning, like, are you mitigating an emergency if you have a first aid kit, or is that just part of your response?
That's part of your response. So like, don't get hurt.
So we don't buy the first aid kit until
Yeah.
after we know someone's gonna
So
hurt
yeah,
themselves.
no, it's a great and confusing point. And that really, when you talk about mitigation, you're trying to, again, somehow reduce the amount of damage that is done. So, you know, not a more kind of example is like when we talk about shootings, it's about hardening a facility to prevent there from being the shooting to happen in the first place. So like reducing the impact or ability for there to be a hazard. Cyber, buying, you know, upgraded firewalls, kind of trying to somehow prevent it altogether. Extreme heat is really hard because we're talking about promoting having adequate cooling, green spaces, and you just honestly climate change, big global world scale problems that would ultimately reduce those kind of, you know, extreme temperature situations that we do have in the plan, but the items you're talking about will specifically be in our more tactical and operational response plans that we have.
So is the personnel commitment or emergency staff, is that not part of the mitigation part?
No, all of that would be in our emergency operations plan. It's on the same place on our emergency operations plan is also just up on the site as well. Also extremely long document, which has our staffing structure. There's an annex for each hazard, the ones you have identified, but the base plan is how we operate all hazards, doesn't matter. Staffing is a perfect example of how we function in the incident command system. Doesn't matter the hazard. Both plans feed off of each other. It's just what stage we are in the disaster, and the mitigation is, it's called pre-disaster mitigation is actually the name of the grant that we get.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get lost in parsimony if that's the way that the system is run.
Yeah.
I just was looking there thinking to your point, if we harden a building to improve the security of the school, we also generally add people whose job it is to keep an eye on that and to provide extra security capacity for, you know, events that might need it. So likewise, I think one of the biggest bottlenecks that we get when we try to do either cold or warming stations is there isn't staff to run them. Like, and if we have, for example, a heat wave over a 3-day weekend, then maybe the library's closed, so that limits our options. So if that's in the operations side, I guess that's where I'll look for it.
And I would say, though, another point you just made, like we've identified that, you know, our HVAC systems in our city buildings are a key component to having heating and cooling centers in our designated places. So having the ability to heat and cool buildings is a key mitigation item that we have identified. Generators is another one. So as part of the hazard mitigation plan, we did a citywide generator assessment for alternate emergency power. So generators is another example of, okay, trying to mitigate the impact of a power outage so that we can still function.
I think the library will be very excited about having their
Yes,
HVAC system
and the library is a
prioritized.
great partner in all emergency preparedness things that we do.
All right, well, thanks for your answers.
Other aldermen have questions? Comments? Alderman Clements.
Yeah, just stay for the record. I just want to ask a question through you. If there are other aldermen who are not here at this committee and they have specific questions, can they reach out to you directly?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Great. I'll just make a couple comments. I appreciated that there was a good section around climate change as we're seeing not only heating, but also it getting colder at night. I'd love to see affordable housing maybe become considered a mitigation Policy, I know that might be a little bit of a twist, but if you think about it, if people are housed, then they're not out in the elements. I didn't know that we had the ability to buy flood insurance.
Ah,
My very
yes,
first-
most people think that if they don't have the ability to buy flood insurance.
Yeah, I think
but-
they told us we didn't, because when I bought my house, I had a flood. That was the only time my house was flooded. It was really rainy that year, and I had my basement flooded. So I didn't know that. That was a fascinating thing to learn tonight. Alderman Lopez, I saw your hand go flying up. What do you need?
Yeah, now I'm starting to forget what I was saying. With regards to the, oh, no, it's definitely, yeah, I
I
forgot.
was talking
Oh,
about
no,
housing.
anticipating questions that other aldermen might bring.
Sure.
If we use the mitigation plan, it's just a plan. It's not an obligation to seek out, pursue, or obtain specifically federal funds. Could it be used for
Correct.
private endowments too, or donations, things like that?
Yes, and okay, so a couple points. I want to say everyone can buy flood insurance. Everyone can buy flood insurance. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Everyone, I have flood insurance for my house. Where it rains, it floods. So wherever you think you live that doesn't flood, you're wrong. Where it rains, it floods. About this time last year, in September 11th, we had the worst flood the city has ever seen. 6.25 inches of rain in 2 hours. Over 250 properties were flooded. Not a single one had flood insurance because they told me it's never flooded here before. And I said, it will, again, please get flood insurance. So get flood insurance, highly recommend it. It's worth it because your homeowner's insurance does not, I repeat, does not cover flood damage. The other thing about climate change, what we tried to do is we had two parallel planning efforts this year. One was the Livable Nashua Resiliency Plan, which was a spin-off of the last 5 years of the Hazard Mitigation Plan. So the Hazard Mitigation Plan from 2019 included our resiliency plan in it. This year, we didn't want to be included in a 300-page document, the 30 pages that we have in the sustainability plan, where we talk about affordable housing. So what we tried to do is actually pull all that stuff out, put it in the sustainability plan, and talk about it in terms of resilience. The two documents are intrinsically linked. It was just that we have to use the FEMA format for the hazard mitigation plan, and that's not readable, digestible for most human beings. So what we did is we pulled that stuff out, and those things that you're mentioning, the hazard mitigation plan, a lot of the things that Alderman Lopez mentioned to start about our vulnerable communities are in the sustainability plan. And those two planning efforts are staying like in parallel with each other. But then most importantly, to the point that Alderman Lopez just made, again, this commits us to nothing. It just sets out a path forward so that we can pursue things as they arise. And then for the planning efforts for this hazard mitigation plan, this include the whole community. So we had our businesses part of it, our nonprofits, residents, other city agencies. They can leverage that to also go after funding that's out there. Specifically, our nonprofits can go after, there's nonprofit Homeland Security grant funding that they can go after to also implement mitigation items in their facilities and on their properties by referencing our hazard mitigation plan, because it's the collective cities. So to your point, Alderman Lopez, it also empowers others within our community to also seek out federal funding as well. I don't know if that was,
And also non-federal funding.
and also non-federal, and you know,
It's
really.
very important to some people.
Yeah, you can use it for whatever, but basically what we've done is as a collective city, we've said, oh, these are our joint priorities. This will be a value add to our community. So, to your point, actually, I'll give a specific example. The Humane Society, through doing this process, and because they lost power, they fundraised through individual donors to get a generator. So that's a perfect example. They wanted to be able to, I loaned them one we had because they were out of power and it was freezing. And they were like, okay, we saw this as a priority. We raised the funds through donations. Now they have a standalone generator at their facility as a mitigation item. So to your point exactly, not only can they do that, that actually is happening because we're coming together and we're discussing these things and people are learning about individual and personal mitigation actions they should be taking as part of their organization. Because it's a collective effort. Like, if everybody in the city needs a generator when they lose power, we're going to be in trouble. But if we all understand our shared commitment to being more resilient in the city, then we're going to have areas of refuge that people can go to.
So I just want to comment that you have such an incredible energy, and the way that you approach this mitigation plan just sounds so very thorough and a little bit different than it's been done. So I thank you for that, very much so.
You're welcome.
I did not read all 300 pages.
No, that's
but I
okay.
skimmed.
Don't,
I skimmed.
if you have a question, just ask me. I have read it. So I'm happy to answer any questions specifically. If anybody needs my number, if you don't already have it, definitely I can give you my number if there's also an emergency.
It's also well organized, just for the public's knowledge. 300 pages is intimidating.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm speaking out of turn. But I mean, like,
Alderman Lopez.
so's an encyclopedia. You
Yeah.
don't read the whole thing. You reference what you need to.
Yes, there it is, and the final version will be, on our emergency management site. The PDF will be hyperlinked to Alderman Lopez's point, so you can kind of go to the section you're most interested in. And then the other thing is a lot of that is featured on the Livable Nashua dashboard. So, and that's much more interactive, and then we also have in there, the different priority mitigation actions as part of the Livable Nashua, dashboard, which again, more visual. I'm a more visual person, so the plan's a little tough from that perspective, but the content is in there, basically in the required format that we have to do so that FEMA, approves it so we can get money if we need it.
I have two more comments. So I appreciated your comment around climate change and how you separated out the sustainability plan. I think that's an incredible document that's so accessible to most people to see the work that we're doing to start to make us more resilient. So thank you for commenting on that, because I think that makes a ton of sense for people to be able to find and access. I wanted to know about the discount. If you want to get flood insurance, how do I get that discount?
Yeah, well, it's automatic, and it's for the entire community. That's the great thing. And so through so all flood insurance is subsidized through the federal government, because obviously there's not a business incentive to supporting an insurance industry for flooding, because it is the world's and the country's and the state of New Hampshire's #1 hazard is flooding. So you can, you don't really need to shop around, because the flood insurance rates are set by the federal government. So you can go through your home insurance company, ask them if they are a broker for flood insurance in the state, and get a quote. Again, you don't really need to shop around, because it's a fixed price for your property set by the federal government based on your risk. Different communities across the state, across the country, have invested in policies that get them a discount through what's called the community rating system. Our sustainability manager, Deb Chisholm, is our floodplain manager as well, and she also manages our participation in the National Flood Insurance Program, and she's the one who certifies every year what we meet for our standard for the community rating system that gets us a certain percentage discount on your base policy. So it's automatic, it's already factored in, and it's for everybody. But that also means that, we're all benefiting from the investment that the city is making in hazard mitigation, specifically when it comes to floodways, waterways, our wetlands, which we talked about earlier, which are really important. So this collective investment gets everybody a discount. If you watch the news, there was a county down in Florida who didn't take that seriously, and FEMA pulled their discount because they thought it was just, once they got it, it was given to them. But they're pretty serious. Like, you have to be proactive. And I know one alderman asked me the last time, why hazard mitigation? Well, the fact is hazard mitigation pays. For every $1 you spend, you get $13 back. That's a lot. That's a lot of money, and that's independently verified. You can Google that. But mitigation, really, it just is upfront. It's a whole lot cheaper to mitigate than it is to repair what has lost and damaged. We can look at what's happening across the country right now with the hurricanes. That damage is in the billions and billions of dollars, but you look and you'll see some properties that did proper mitigation, they're still standing. Their roofs are still on, they were elevated, they had for places that were affected by landslides, they had cleared uprush from them and their houses stayed. So there's proper mitigation actions that can be taken that ultimately save in the long run. And when it comes to a city and the city's infrastructure, that's really, really important because the cost can be astronomical and a disaster declaration is not guaranteed. So, we can't just count on that there being a big enough disaster. Like our flooding disaster last year did not qualify. It had to be, they have to meet a certain threshold and we didn't even come close. So that's an example of why it's important that we have a plan and we make these investments so that, we're not stuck with some sticker shock bill at the end.
Everyone else set from the committee? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, the motion on the floor is to recommend final passage. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. New business ordinances,
There are none.
tabled in committee.
There is none.
Public comment. There is none.
There is none.
General discussion. Would anyone like to make some remarks this evening? Okay, do I have a motion?
Yes, motion to adjourn.
Motion before us is to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned at 8:01. Thank you, everyone.